The FF14 team have gotten into a bit of PR hot water recently, in the wake of the most recent live letter showcasing patch 7.3, as well as discussing feedback for Occult Crescent and Cosmic Exploration. Yoshida opened with a surprisingly candid concession, stating that he felt their quality of service has declined recently, apologising and going on to talk about the excessive number of hotfixes and maintenance periods that have been required to fix bugs over dawntrail's patches. He continued on, stating that it felt like they got too comfortable. But the comment that drew the most ire, and the one which I will discuss further later, is one in which he mentioned cost being the inhibiting factor as to why there was no normal mode of the capstone dungeon for the Occult Crescent, Forked Tower. This led to a slew of negative news articles from a sphere of games journalists that usually champion the game. Adding further fuel to the fire though, and I think somewhat more telling, were the comments made by Square Enix's president, Takashi Kiryu, at a recent shareholder meeting. When asked whether the game had experienced a decline in game quality and a loss of fans since dawntrail's release, he replied that Square Enix are aware of this. The reason I'm introducing a video about the Forked Tower like this is because, as far as I'm concerned, the two are intrinsically interlinked. My primary and unfortunate takeaway, having taken part in multiple progressions and clears both, are that it is a clear indicator that in this case, Square Enix were not thinking about how players would consume their content whatsoever. It's an instance full of promise, marred by disappointing oversights and baffling decisions that left me feeling malaise more than excitement. But then, just as I was editing this video, Square Enix put out a statement. The changes which, originally, we'd be waiting upwards of a month to see materialize are being rushed out the door, and by the time this video goes live, will already have been released, and additional alterations will be coming, with 7.3 further down the line. In a way, this is nice, because I can give my impressions which were written before this announcement, and then my thoughts in the wake of the impending changes, and determine whether they made the right calls, and whether we can consider the issue resolved or not. Firstly, my original impressions. The elephant in the room is Forked Tower's entry system, which closely mimics that of the Baldessian Arsenal from Eureka rather than the more recent Delubrum Reginae and its savage counterpart from Shadowbringers. To give a quick explanation, to get in you will spend silver or gold currency to buy ciphers. When a specific in-duty weather periodically pops, which before the hotfix was often around 30 minutes after an instant spawns, or the previous run ended, it will open the entrance to the dungeon. There was a little bit of nuance to spawning repeat runs of this. As far as I understand, the base timer is 60 minutes after it originally spawns, and then every fate or CE that you do reduces the time, but that's kind of beside the point. You go there, pay one or more ciphers, and get entered into a lottery to go in alongside all the other players on the platform. 48 will be chosen at random, and barring any unintentional raise cheesing, when they have one full party wipe, they will all be kicked out, leveled down, and must regain their currencies to give it another go. In contrast, Delubrum Reginae Savage, its direct equivalent, has an external duty finder queuing system. To say it bluntly, I believe this entry system to be archaic, short-sighted, and frustrating. When Baldessian Arsenal released, Square Enix received a lot of feedback, enough to elicit a direct response from Yoshida and lead battle content designer Nakagawa. In it, Nakagawa explicitly apologizes for the stress players have experienced as a result of the entry requirements for the Baldessian Arsenal. Later in the post, Yoshida chimed in to say that due to the above-mentioned issues and other things we've learned through your feedback, we've caused players a great deal of stress, and this is something we deeply regret. We've been made to realize there are many things we can change and improve upon. We're determined to correct all the major issues and take the experience with us when we develop future content. My responsibility on the FF14 team is to plan and develop battle content that will be enjoyed by all our players. That sounds all well and good, but here we are 6 years later, with the development team seemingly having learned absolutely nothing from the debacle, recreating the exact same issues of the past. So what exactly is the problem? Well, the issue is that this entry system is systematically opposed to the challenges that wait inside for the player. In fact, it feels like it intentionally sets you up for failure. The Forked Tower is a dungeon featuring not 1, but 4 bosses as well as 3 intermediary encounters. These encounters range in difficulty, somewhere in line with various extreme trials, with the key nuance that many have the opportunity for one mispositioned player to wipe the raid, and others feature what can be considered de facto body checks to effectively pass. Whilst lenient, enrages also exist, demanding some level of performance from those tackling them. Throwing additional spanners in the works, specific phantom jobs are essentially required for some encounters, as well as many of the foes heavily incentivizing a tank and healer in each party to ensure that aggro doesn't go wild, resulting in a tank buster landing on an unsuspecting non-knight. And if you wipe once for any reason, you get kicked and must wait 30 minutes as well as regrind your resources to try again. As 48 people, this would all be much more acceptable if there was a single developer measure in place to ensure that players have at least a winnable composition or phantom job spread. But there isn't. Duty Finder and Party Finder, for example, allow you the ability to lock in your preferred job before you queue or join, ensuring that when filled, you will have all the components that will set you up for success, player skill withstanding. You won't load into an extreme with 8 DPS, for example, but that's exactly what can happen with Forked Tower. Theoretically, you can queue in without a single thief, ranger, or bard, combinations which make certain encounters close to impossible to pass. Square Enix have placed a piece of content in the game that has a number of requirements and expectations to clear, with 0 barriers to allow entrants to natively organize or collaborate, fully expecting them to police themselves. Of course, that's what many did. Just as the case with Baldessian Arsenal, players attempted to circumvent some of the myriad frustrations by organizing externally, and many community Discord servers cropped up to give players the foundation for success that Square Enix didn't bother to. This would ensure that jobs and party composition would be correctly set, provide strat resources to help players learn, and schedule runs so that 48 people can get together to try it out. You know, what you'd expect. But the system actively fights against this. You can't queue into Occult Crescent with those 48 players. Instead, you must inanely hop in and out of instance at the same time in the hopes that your 6 parties end up together eventually. In my experience, this can take anywhere from 5 minutes to 45. Thankfully, Square Enix have announced that the ability to queue in as a pre-made of 48 will be added with the upcoming hotfix, but this begs the question as to why it took them this long to understand that it was a problem in the first place. This hurdle existed with BA2. They claimed to have learnt from their mistakes, but as far as I can see, they've only learnt to replicate them. Once you overcome this initial challenge, though, a group must deal with the second. Snipers. Because the entry podium is public, anybody can enter. Whether you have 48 players pre-made or not, no priority is given to full parties over solo players. No option to tag the run by intent, as you can with Party Finder. It is perfectly foreseeable, and has been something I have witnessed happening a number of times, to have the scenario occur where you sign up or organize a run, get everyone together, wait 45 minutes to enter instance, wait another 35 for the weather to pop, insert your cipher, and then find that a random player has taken your spot in the run. Usually they proceed to die to one of the opening mechanics, wasting not only your time, but their own. The game doesn't even do the due diligence of properly signposting its challenge, as it does in the case of BA. Some will remain silent, unaware of what they've really signed up for and unwilling to communicate on the matter. Others are willful trolls that are intentionally there to cause a hindrance for others. Some will spam Geomancer Levitate to buff cap players. Others will arrogantly expect to be carried whilst contributing far less than the bare minimum, and spark arguments when their own failures cost them. It directly pits players against one another, causing more in the way of conflict than coordination. All of this yapping, and I haven't even begun to discuss the battles themselves, because the issues with the entry system are so deep-seated that I would argue they utterly ruin the experience of what could otherwise be a fairly fun dungeon. A Forked Tower run intentionally wastes your time, expecting you to invest at minimum 40 minutes before you even get to try a single boss, directly sets you up in conflict with unwitting players and bad actors in equal measure, and shies away from implementing even a single system to aid in making organization less of a headache. All that before you even start. Yoshida stated that they felt like the support through the system in DRS was a bit too high, so they wanted to reduce this a bit. But there is no support through the system. It doesn't exist. Stress should exist in the content itself, yes. Moments which get the adrenaline pumping and make challengers feel like they overcame something unclear. Not in the entry system. You cannot state that you have, and I quote, "Responsibility on the FF14 team is to plan and develop battle content that will be enjoyed by all our players, whilst lazily implementing systems to ensure that Forked Tower, thanks to all of these external inhibitors, is content for nobody." If it is intended to be challenging content tackled by groups that organize themselves, then they should be able to queue in with all of the members of that group that they organized. If it is intended to be pick-up content tackled with randoms in the instance, then limited raises, cost for entry, and required phantom jobs are questionable decisions. The fact that the upcoming hotfix will bring the ability to enter Occult Crescent as a 48-man pre-made implies that it is the former. But if it's the former, why can members of that pre-made be sniped out of the run? It just makes no sense. The entry system and the type of content do not match with one another at all. One solution I personally would have loved to have seen is to cater to both audiences. Implement an external queuing system just like Delubrum has, and charge all entrants a cipher for their convenience. Keep the podium and the entry system in Occult Crescent, but remove the requirement to insert ciphers entirely. This means that pug runs don't have to put up such a cost to enter. It's for all intents and purposes free, and whilst their chances of clearing are drastically reduced in comparison to an organised run, they might take down a boss or two and obtain some sanguinite. The second key issue is that as much as the entry system would have you believe that OC directly followed Eureka in release, it doesn't. Bozja is a thing that happened. Alongside Bozja came not only Delubrum Regine Savage, but a normal version, as well as 2 pug-friendly dungeons in Dalriada and Castrum. These were well received and, in my personal opinion, fantastic fun. They offered an endpoint to your leveling process within these field operations that was not tied to extreme or savage level raiding, that was easily and enjoyably repeatable. Yoshida stated in the live letter that the simple answer on why we didn't have a normal and savage version is cost. This likely means that the development team ran out of time and staff to develop both Forked Tower Savage and a more pug-friendly normal, as they had originally planned, and then they had to make a choice. Because it has been mentioned in the past that a traditional method for the FF14 devs to develop their encounters is to build the harder difficulty first, and then scale back an easier version later down the road, it was only natural that the easier option was on the chopping block when one of them had to go. However, I believe this is a huge mistake. Occult Crescent has been touted as the expansion's answer to easy access, drop-in, drop-out battle content. Yet its endpoint has so many barriers to entry in place that it isn't fitting for the same core audience as the rest of Occult Crescent. It is so painful to get into in the first place that it doesn't seem worth it to those that would initially be interested in its harder variant. In its current state, it doesn't really serve any user base well. If a choice had to be made to cut one or the other, it absolutely should have been the harder version that was lost. So that entire content pipeline of the exploration zone would feel somewhat cohesive and complete. Whilst I do not believe that Forked Tower is too difficult to be cleared by casual players, it is definitely inaccessible. The amount of time you need to invest to even attempt is unreasonable, and is so far removed from the natural gameplay loop that you need to go out of your way to join an organized run to be in with a real chance. This extra step of organization and preparation is exactly what Dalriada and Castrum Lacus Latore avoided. They inserted this endgame dungeon as a native part of the gameplay loop in the zone, making it easy to hop into and get a taste of at will. With so many Phantom jobs relying on the Forked Tower to reach their potential, this is a risky omission to make for the average player. It's disappointing, really, because the current status quo, as I mentioned before, doesn't really serve anybody effectively. Now, after the Lodestone post, how do I feel about all of this? Well, 5 main changes have now been promised. The ability to enter the Occult Crescent instance with a preformed alliance of up to 48 players. Number 2, allowing Auroral Mirages to generate sooner after the Occult Crescent instance has loaded. 3, improvements to the Cypher offering UI. 4, delaying Auroral Mirage generation until an active critical encounter has ended. And 5, enabling exclusive access to the Occult Crescent instance for a set time when joining with a preformed alliance. Step 1 through 4 we already knew about, though some of them are coming with an increased level of urgency. Step 5 is new, and seemingly the way it will work is that after a preformed alliance of 48 queues in and subsequently creates a new Occult Crescent instance, the instance will be locked initially, at least until the Forked Tower spawns and has been entered. With the other changes, the 30+ minute wait on an instant spawn has been drastically reduced, changing a 30-ish minute wait into one that is just 5. This really is a very positive step. It means that without needing to implement any new systems such as an external queue, snipers should essentially be nullified on the first run of the instance. Really, it should have been this way from the get-go. Whilst it doesn't affect in any way the deep-seated issues with the design of the content not really being what Occult Crescent needed to complete a satisfying gameplay loop, what it does is alleviate some of the biggest frustrations for those who, despite that, want to interact with it regardless. Players like me, and as Square Enix is hoping, players like you as well. One slight concern I have is there is a period of about a month between the first few changes being implemented and the last and most important point 5 being implemented. I hope that period won't be chaos. It isn't often that the FF14 team so quickly and decisively respond to criticism with sweeping changes to a piece of content after stating a different timeline entirely. So I have a feeling that they were, in all honesty, not expecting the negative feedback that they received from the patch 7.3 live letter. It screams to me as if alarm bells rang internally after collecting the feedback of their player base in the wake of that presentation, and they decided that the old timeline would potentially cost them subscribers, and that as a result, a more expedited and decisive stance would be required. I like this move a lot though. It's commendable that they did so, and I'm happy to see reflection and immediate adjustment. I hope we see more of this Square Enix going forward, a development team that is willing to take action when something isn't working, without waiting for the next major patch to do so, the way they used to be in the earlier days of FF14 in all honesty. But once you're inside, how is it? Well, it's alright actually. There are 4 boss battles, and in between each is an encounter or exploration section, and I'm going to talk about each here. The opening battle is the Demon Tablet, which menacingly splits the arena in half, utilizing tower soaks and meteor placements to force players to spread on each side, and coordinate well to ensure that all of the mechanical parameters can still be met. It occasionally raises and rotates, doing its utmost to force you off of the limited arena space and into unideal situations. This fight, for the most part, is incredibly simple. It's to the point that you should expect to one-shot it if the people in your party have watched a video beforehand. The main challenge, and by far the most interesting mechanic conceptually, comes in the form of the meteors. Meteors must drop their huge AoEs on one half of the room on the wall to ensure that players have enough space to effectively avoid them on the other side when they explode. Numerous players get stack markers that will send them flying, and these will be used to transport the meteor-marked players safely out of their own AoEs. It's pretty cool. Time mages get a bit of a moment to shine in dispelling debuffs from some ads, but it's overall a very standard affair. The hallways connecting the first and second bosses feel almost like a one-for-one rip of the ones present in Baldessian Arsenal. Traps that need to be located and dismantled, ads that pose little threat but act primarily as speed bumps for the party fill the corridors, and 1 or 2 phantom jobs are given a moment of glory in order to obtain some extra currency. There are these cool trap pathways that thieves can traverse, but that's the most original addition. Up until this point, I was fairly unimpressed. However, I did like the next encounter, the Dead Stars, quite a lot. In the Dead Stars, you fight these 3 guys, a reference to Final Fantasy V where they appear as a boss fight. They'll cycle between each taking the center stage, barraging you with a single phase unique to each of them, with filler AoEs to avoid and damage to mitigate between each. It's simple, structured, and recognizable as a Final Fantasy XIV raider, but it's satisfying to pull off because each individual Dead Star brings a mechanic that feels totally different in execution from the previous ones, giving the overall battle this really nice sense of pacing and variety. The first features manic hopping slimes that players must use to cleanse their debuffs. The second trading this in for 2 snowballs that careen out of control, requiring their charges to be slowed with stacks of player alliances. At the end they'll send the raid flying and must be destroyed. The third brings another new palette, this time based on fire. Fireball towers will spawn to be soaked by tanks which blast out huge cleaves, eerily reminiscent of a scaled back version of those Valley Garmanda mechanics from the beginning of the expansion. This, whilst not requiring any particular phantom job, is the first time that the roles of separate alliances begin to truly feel clearly defined. There are mechanics that will have particular alliances take towers in Demon Tablet, but here in Dead Stars you are constantly familiarized with treating your party, and as an expansion your half of the 48-man raid, as a unit. This all leads on to the next encounter, and the one that I personally feel is the best fitting as a proof of concept for how phantom jobs could and should work in Occult Crescent, the bridge encounter. This is, bar none, the strongest use case for phantom jobs in the entirety of not just the Forked Tower, but the Occult Crescent on the whole. 2 bridges with half of the raid taking each, and they need to cross it, dealing with myriad threats along the way and ensuring that they keep a healthy pace, lest they be caught by the ever-increasing trail of flame in their wake. Traps are everywhere, allowing rangers and thieves to take the lead, carving a path for their allies. Foes along the way must be interrupted, their buffs dispelled by time mages, or stunned via Bard's Romeo Ballad to prevent fatal attacks from reaching fruition. Geomancers are afforded a chance to shine too, traversing side paths with their levitate to rebuild gaps in the bridge for the rest of the raid. At the end, these two mini-bosses await, one on each bridge, and their core mechanic revolves around drawing them close or far from one another. I would have loved to see a fully fledged boss encounter that captures this essence, because it's different enough from the rest of FF14's offerings to feel genuinely fresh. Different jobs having their moments of glory, or their unique traversal and trapping capabilities having some functional use, as something that, as far as I'm concerned, should have been expanded into the Occult Crescent as an entirety. Accessing shortcuts, or special chest spots, or paths that may contain secrets would give these Phantom Job skills some kind of purpose outside the few encounters specifically designed with them in mind. The third boss is the Marble Dragon, and I really wanted to like this one. Parts of it I do, but its main issue is that despite presenting some of the most interesting puzzles in the entirety of the Fork Tower, it's what I like to refer to as a marker fight. For most of its runtime, you can mark the head of one confident player and just follow them for every mechanic. There is no splitting nor individual player agency. This is how I imagine many will end up dealing with it, and I can confidently say that in the clear that I did in which I was a shot caller, that's what a healthy quantity of players did. I'm always more of a fan of mechanics that reward learning yourself, so I kind of wish the execution of many of these puzzles had been handled slightly differently. The core of the Marble Dragon fight are these puddles it spawns, which take two different shapes, the basic circles and the spiked pluses. When these puddles are frozen by ice, which the boss periodically spits out, they will shortly afterwards explode for these huge AoEs, telegraphing either their circular or plus shape. Various patterns of these puddles will spawn, and players will need to avoid their wrath. These patterns are pretty fixed and only have few permutations, so it's more than anything a memorization game. Later on, players can be debuffed, which requires them to be frozen alongside the water, failing the mechanic just like Beyond Death in a way, to avoid that debuff from killing them. What I like much more though is the ads phase that occurs around halfway through. 6 golems. Each must be split from one another, and the dragon itself dive bombing through the center of the arena, freezing towers that then must be shared in sequence. This little phase here creates this really satisfying little loop of avoiding the dive bomb, then checking to take a tower, then avoiding the plus detonation, and then after that scrambling to one of the 4 new towers that need to be soaked. It feels good to do, and the pacing is just high enough to make it work. One thing I do appreciate, and the first time I really noticed it was during this encounter, is the fact that the raid wides are suitably imposing enough to make use of those phantom shielding and mitigations, such as Unicorn's shield. Whilst few and far between, they hit exceptionally hard for difficulties lower than Savage, expecting that target mitigation will be on the boss, and substantial shielding on the party to render them safe. You actually feel useful for bringing those tools. Following on from this third boss comes a series of rooms, each with simple and mostly uninteresting ads that can be tackled in any order. 1 or 2 standouts here are this little guy who needs to have his weapon pilfered by a thief, or he will begin to one-shot people, and an enemy that will place delayed dooms on those nearby, requiring a cleanse. Once they're all cleared, the center puzzle can be solved by standing on plates reminiscent of a similar puzzle in Castrum, before the locksmith encounter begins. This one is honestly kind of uninteresting, despite including the quote-unquote secret of the forked tower within. Waves of locksmiths spawn, 3 at a time, and will try to stop the lock you're configuring, interrupt their casts, and defeat them. This goes on for 8 waves in total, and on the 8th a master locksmith spawns. Let him reconfigure the lock, and it will reveal the secret of the empty room with no floor, a huge map of the occult crescent and a special support fate for those outside, offering more loot to the Forks Tower challengers upon clear. Once you defeat the master locksmith, the puzzle resets and you must redo both it and the locksmith afterwards. The Magitor is the final boss, and it's definitely the most difficult of the pack. Not in complexity, but in reducing the leniency of timing in the dodges to avoid its attacks. I would argue it's just as simple as the others, but quicker, featuring baited auto attacks on close or far targets based on its weapon animation, and fairly precise in or out dodges, utilizing the arena's 3 large squares as inhibiting factors. All of this takes place whilst Assassin's Dagger's line AoEs rotate around the arena, giving you a second threat to focus on, assuming you aren't using carefully positioned markers to invalidate them entirely. Really though, the headline mechanics are essentially an additional page from Zelenia's handbook. Each of those 3 aforementioned squares, as well as the rest of the room, count as a unique instance, and when certain attacks hit them, they will splash across the entirety of that instance that they touched. Some players will be targeted with puddles that they must equally spread across these instances, and at other times rotating explosions and stacks require the parties to weave carefully in and out of them to avoid being hit multiple times at once. It's easy to understand, but engaging and rewarding to accomplish. Berserker gets a special moment to shine here too, being the only Phantom job able to destroy this purple canister without punishment. As an entirety, it's weird. It has some highs in the bridge and the Magitor that feel fantastic to do or make use of their status in being within the rules of Occult Crescent to create something unique. But sections like the locksmiths feel boring, tacked on, and a little bit time-wasty, and the Demon Wall 2 gets stale almost immediately. I've enjoyed my time within it, but I wasn't ever left feeling that it reached the same levels of execution nor vision that Delubrum Regine Savage did, and conversely, I never felt like it treaded any new ground in any meaningful way like Baldessian Arsenal was able to. It's reminiscent of many of the issues that plague Occult Crescent as a field exploration, honestly. In my discussion video about the Occult Crescent, I flamed Phantom jobs pretty hard. I stated that many were boring and having their one use case be inside the tower actively harmed their value and versatility in other sections of the content. Post-tower, do I feel any different? No, I don't. If anything, these jobs finally getting a reason to shine makes me even more frustrated at how underutilized they are elsewhere in the zone. My biggest hope is that this is a lesson learned for the future, and that additional jobs set to be added in 7.45 will either bring more expansive multi-purpose kits, or really focus on a singular enjoyable vision that will change your playstyle somewhat from the rest of the game into something new. I know that in this video, especially the opening segments, I was fairly negative. And whilst I don't like to make overly negative videos, in this case I felt it was appropriate. With another zone release, as well as an endpoint dungeon joining Occult Crescent's arsenal in patch 7.5, Square Enix have the chance to stand by their word and learn from their choices this time around. Whatever shape this dungeon takes, it needs a more accessible normal mode, and it needs to show consideration for the way that players interact with it, making sure that it doesn't intentionally waste your time or choose obtuseness and obstruction over fun, engaging challenge. We want to play the content, so please don't make it a headache to do so. The battles inside, for the most part, are well designed and enjoyable to execute, and it's a shame that not enough people will be afforded the opportunity to enjoy them. As battles, external factors notwithstanding, these are not hardcore challenges. Many players would find success in tackling them, and it's a shame that everything surrounding it makes it such a hassle to bring that enjoyment into reality. Better luck next time, I suppose. Thank you so much for watching this video. If you made it all the way to the end, I really do appreciate it. I have a Patreon. You don't need to support it, but if you do, it will allow me to keep uploading here more regularly. This video was available to patrons a day before it went live publicly, and every video I publish either goes live there first or includes exclusive additional content for those that support me. The people on screen now are the reason I was able to make this one, and I'm greatly appreciative. I'll have pre-release excerpts for future videos there, as well as some exclusive content, and you'll be included in the credits of future videos. No pressure, though, and of course, thank you so much for watching, and I hope you have a fantastic rest of your day.